a glowing light to a world that needed leadership. A nation where men and women could plot their own destiny without fear of a tyrannical government. We knew then that King George III and Parliament would not long be able to govern us, for we were a people who strove for liberty, who strove for freedom, who wanted to plot our own destiny. And so we did. I can tell you about my life, my early childhood and my young adulthood. I could tell you about my middle years, and you might find it electrifying. But some storm clouds rolled in that required me to take a different path. I realized, as did so many of my patriot friends, that our country was being oppressed with what we call the usurpations of Great Britain's tyrannical government. We were taxed beyond our means to pay. We were not allowed to have self-government. We were not allowed to have the freedom of religion. We were not allowed to have our own assemblies that were not controlled by England. We wanted freedom. And we realized that the only way we were going to get freedom was to go to war and fight for that freedom. My friends, today you are in a war. You are in a war that will be ultimate defeat if the great patriots of these United States of America do not continue to unite as you have united in the past 2 or 3 years. I missed the first Tea Party, but I was given an opportunity that few understand to come to this time and encourage you that there will need to be more tea parties. There will need to be more protest against the tyrannical government that we have placed in our nation's capital. We must decide as a people that we will be taxed no more, for we have been taxed enough already. In 1776, we drafted a declaration. It was a declaration of the 13 colonies that declared that independence was our goal. We did not hate Great Britain. In fact, many of us would like to have had reconciliation. Many of us would like to have been able to go to the King and to Parliament and say, if you will give us what we desire, self-government, we will be your loyal subjects. But that wasn't to be the case. For the King and Parliament would have nothing but to tax us into oblivion, to pay for their debts that they had incurred, and they would have no consideration of self-government. Our assemblies were governed from England. The House of Burgesses in Virginia was governed primarily from England until Patrick Henry stood up in that galley and in that pulpit of the House of Burgesses, and he said those famous words, "I know not what course others may take, but as for me, give me liberty or give me death." We pledged in that great declaration at the end that we would mutually agree to one another to give our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. I ask you today, these over 200 years later, are you willing to give your lives, your fortune, and if necessary, your sacred honor? The years passed during that great war for independence. We were not revolutionaries. We wanted independence. That was a war for independence. We achieved that. We achieved that against the greatest odds that you could ever imagine. It should not have happened, my friends, but it did. And then we gathered again in 1787 in that hot Philadelphia town, in that state hall, that state house. we gathered to revise the Articles of Confederation. Those articles were designed to have a loose-knit organization among the colonies, but they were on a strictly voluntary basis. If the colonies wanted to give a little money, they gave a little. If they wanted to give none, they gave none. If they wanted to support the Union, they did not. Yeah, they did. If they did not, they did not. And so we realized that a Constitution had to be drawn, and that Constitution would replace the Articles of Confederation. There was bickering, there was complaining, there was arguing. I, for one, did not want a bicameral legislature. I wanted a unicameral legislature. I thought one would be enough, but I was overruled, and I graciously stepped back because I have learned over the years, my friend, that I was not always right. That as I grew older, and I did grow older, that sometimes I had to change my mind. And so I agree. We have a bicameral legislature. The Senate to be elected by the state legislatures, the House of Representatives to be elected by the people. And lo and behold, something happened, I understand, along the way, and the state legislatures in Amendment 17 were no longer allowed to elect the senators, and the people elected the senators. Did we have a bicameral government then? No, we had a mishmash of a unicameral government. But today, that's the way it is, my friends. And that is not my objective today, is to ask you to repeal the 17th Amendment. You might want to consider that, but you might want to consider the 16th as well. What I want to encourage you to do today is to teach your friends to read this Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure the domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, and promote the general welfare to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain this Constitution for the United States of America. We, the people of the United States, not the judiciary of the United States, not the Congress of the United States, not the executive branch of the United States. We, the people, in order to form a more perfect union. Are we the people? You the people? Are you the people, we the people who are going to take our government back? Are you the people, are we the people who are going to say no to the tyrannical government that you have inherited? Are you going to? Are you willing to pledge your lives, your fortune, and your sacred honor? I hope that you will. It was a difficult time in that 1787 State House in Philadelphia. It really was a difficult time. In fact, we argued and bickered so much that I was often accused of being the least religious of the group, decided it was important that we had prayer before each session. Well, we were going to go and hire a clergy because, you know, in those days only the clergy could pray. We had that wrong, didn't we? But we were going to do that, but we didn't have any money. And we didn't want the people to think we didn't know what we were doing. And so my resolution to have prayer was overruled. But let me tell you what I told those delegates at that convention. I said that we have gone through a war. And when we go through a war, there has got to be divine guidance if we're going to win. We've been through a war, and the divine protected us through that war. He knows when a sparrow falls. Surely he knows what we're doing. And so I looked up at General Washington, who was the president of that convention, and I said to him, "Sir, I have lived long. And the longer I live, the more convincing proofs that I see that God governs in the affairs of men." I was accused of being an atheist. I'll admit, when I was a young man, I admitted that I was a thorough deist. But the longer I live, the more convincing proofs that I have that God ordained this nation. The Pledge of Allegiance to the flag was not around when I was young, in my 70s and 80s. But it was brought about later, and that was good. And then in the early 1950s, we entered under God. There are those who would have that removed. But I can assure you, my friends, if those of you who are of faith would stand by and let that be removed, then I say shame. Don't let it happen. But if you are overruled and it is removed, do not let it be removed from your daily discourse. Do not let it be removed from your pulpits. And if we have preachers here today, I expect you preachers to preach the truth from the pulpit, because I can assure you, my friends, it is not just government, it is government and the preaching of the pulpit. Don't be a coward. Don't be afraid to speak up. Don't be afraid of your congregations. Don't be afraid of your government. Don't be afraid of those who would come against you. Speak up for the truth, and the truth will indeed set you free. I am a strong believer that when the people are united, things get done. The forces of evil unite. And when the forces of evil unite, they succeed. When the forces of good unite, the forces of good succeed. You will not please all of the people. You will have friends and loved ones who will forsake you. It reminds me of a story of Aesop about the miller and the boy and the donkey. It seems that the miller and his son were leading a donkey to market one day when some men standing in a field jeered and laughed at the miller and said, "You horrible man, you're making your little son walk. Why don't you put him upon that donkey?" And so the miller did. They went a little longer, and then they passed by a yard where some children were playing. The children laughed and they jeered and they hollered and they said, why, you cruel little boy, why is it you're making your elderly father walk? Get off of that donkey and let that old man walk." So the little boy got off of the donkey, and the man got on. And a little while longer they went along, and some more people were looking. They hollered, they said, "Why, you cruel man, why don't you just put that boy up there with you so you both can ride?" And so the miller did. And a little longer they rode, and some more people were laughing and carrying on, and they said, "Why, you cruel man, why in the world are you burdening that poor little donkey down so much?" Well, the man and the boy got off the donkey. And a few minutes later someone hollered, "That donkey looks exhausted. Why don't you carry the donkey?" And so they got a stick, and they tied the donkey's legs together, and they put the donkey on the shoulder of the boy and the shoulder of the miller, and they walked a little farther along. And then they went by another yard, and some kids were laughing and throwing stones. They said, "That's the silliest thing I've ever seen." The donkey got excited and scared and lurched about, fell off of the pole, down an embankment, into the river, and drowned. The moral of this story is, when you try to please everybody, you please no one. My friends, you're not going to please everyone. I'm going to close with this. As we were in the convention, I looked over at General Washington's chair. And on the back of his chair, there was an artist's drawing of a sun. The sun was on the horizon. And I could not tell if it was a rising sun or a setting sun. After the convention was over, and we realized that we had formed a new nation, I was convinced that it was a rising sun. So my friends, I ask you today, do we have a rising sun, or do we have a setting sun? As I walked out of the courthouse that day, of the State House, Miss Powell came up to me and she looked and she said, "Dr. Franklin, what have you given us? A monarchy or a republic?" I said to her, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." Have you kept our republic? Have you let it slip into fascism and socialism, and even in some instances a rampant democracy? I ask you the same, I give you the same answer to the question. A republic, if we can keep it. Pledge today that you will restore our republic. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless America.